Well, I mean, this really started with work I think that mainly Iris was doing. You probably know she was kind of a pioneer in looking at comparative policy analysis. And, it started the Journal of Comparative Policy Analysis and so on. And one of the things I think that, not just her and I, but many people had noticed was that there was a lack of just kind of baseline information on what it is that professional kind of policy analysts were doing in government and outside of government. This was probably around 2000, 2004, something like that. And we thought that probably the best way to organize this would be done at the kind of national level, but we'd be able to look at subnational developments and then also, how the international, uh, regime, whatever was affecting, the national one. Um, in 2006, I think 2007, we had a couple of panels at the Canadian Political Science Association annual general meeting where we were starting to do this on Canada. And so in 2007, we put out a book on policy analysis in Canada. That was with University of Toronto Press. And we thought that might be a good template for volumes from other countries. And Iris was interested in that. We contacted a number of presses, Policy Press, which is now the University of Bristol Press in the UK, was very receptive and very interested in that. And so we basically started commissioning volumes from people we knew in different countries who we knew were really familiar with the activities and goings on in those countries. Put together a series of books. And then since then, it's kind of taken on a life of its own in the sense that we don't have to prime the pump anymore. People come to us and say, we've been working on Colombia or we've been working on Chile or what have you. We've seen the series and we'd like to do, a book in the series.
At the time, my Professor Michael Howlett was the co-editor of the Journal of Comparative Policy Analysis, and he had a book called Policy Analysis in Canada. And then we thought, I was at Simon Fraser as well at the time, that it would be interesting to have similar books about other countries. The idea being, and this is the idea behind the Library of Policy Analysis, to be able to compare countries across agencies, governmental units, policy making initiatives, policy making practices, and so on and so forth. So we involved, as I said, I was at the time at Simon Fraser. The journal was hosted at Simon Fraser University of Vancouver. The society was hosted there. And we decided to involve editorial board members from various countries to write about their countries in the same way as policy analysis in Canada has been done. So this is the incentive being to advance comparative policy studies. And you'll probably ask me about this later on, but the first publication was in 2015. We thought it's going to last for 2-3 years. We are in 2025 and we still have volumes on pipeline because people are approaching us from various countries around the world. And we've had South Korea, and we've had Germany, and we've had Australia, and we had New Zealand, and we had Mexico, and we had Colombia. So these are just a few. There are about 20 volumes in the series so far, and we are still amazed that people want to write about it because it allows a peek into what happens in each country. And it allows for comparisons with other countries. And as the mission is to advance comparative policy studies, that's the journal and the society. And therefore, we are sponsoring through our membership and our colleagues and friends.
Well, I mean, I think, for me and for, I think, the scholarly community, I mean, it's a kind of record now, extending over a 20-year period. So it has kind of a longitudinal aspect as well. But it's a sort of record and a systematic analysis of the development of policy analysis in these different countries. And it's not just at the national level. So, each of the volumes has subnational aspects, kind of local government aspects, and it looks not just at sort of governmental policy analysts, but also people in the non-governmental sector. And it has a fairly broad sort of view of what government means. So we're talking not just about the executive and the administration, but also people who work for, the courts or the legislature or legislative committees and so on. So, individually, each chapter or each book, I should say, is very comprehensive. And in many cases, it's the only book that exists. In some cases, it may be the only book that exists in English. And the nice thing about them is that they're all done according to the same template, that is, using the same basic structure. There's some variation, in different countries and so on, but using the same basic structure that we set out in the initial University of Toronto Press volume. And that means that it's quite easy to compare countries. So, if you're interested in something like policy analysis in the legislatures in Latin America, well, we have volumes on, like, coming out on Chile, there's volumes on Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, et cetera. And someone can go to those and immediately see, in one place what is happening and what has been happening in those different countries, and compare them. And then if they want to, look for other sources to fill in the gaps in any other areas that they're interested in. So it really is a valuable collection. And some people have, of course, drawn on that. So, when you look at the citations and so on for the volumes, they're being used a lot. Some people are using them for teaching purposes, not necessarily as central text, but as sort of supplementary works and so on. That's all great. That's certainly what we did with the Canadian volume. So it allows you to use, a more generic kind of central text. And then when you want to get into the details of the empirical situation, then you can use the International Library and Policy Analysis book, for that. So it matches up very nicely in that way for pedagogical purposes.
Yes, there is. There is actually two in the pipeline. One is policy analysis in the Philippines that has been reviewed. The editors have had feedback, and they are working on it. And the other one is policy analysis in India, which had been reviewed, and the authors just are writing now the full chapters. Yes, these are the two that are at the moment in the pipeline, but there are others who are inquiring. Yes. Well, policy analysis has started in North America. Then in the 80s, 90s, maybe earlier, but it became more of a field of study and academic, professional in the 90s, second part of the 90s, and so on. It has taken a very long time for it to reach even Canada or across the border north, or to cross the Atlantic to Europe. It has taken another good 10, 15 and more years, mainly because these countries have the very strong traditions of doing public policy and decision making, which policy analysis is basically that engines that produces transparent evidence for decision making, I would say. And very little is even nowadays known about what is being done in India or the Philippines.
We had initially a lot of interest in Asia and in Europe. And since then, we've had more interest in Latin America, but we still have a lot of room to go. We haven't had a volume on Africa yet, so I'd like to see, some more works coming out there. You probably know there's a pretty vibrant kind of community of policy scholars now in places like the Ivory Coast and Kenya, Senegal, and other places, also in the Maghreb and the MENA kind of region. So I expect that we'll start to get volumes from there as well. There's really no limit on what we can do.